I found the listing on a Thursday, buried in the back pages of a local rental site. A 2-bedroom house, 40 minutes outside town, for $400 a month. The photos showed peeling paint and a sagging porch, but it was livable, too cheap to question. The landlord, a gruff guy named Ray, met me at the curb with a handshake and a key. "No one stayed long," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Pays the bills, though." I signed the lease on the hood of his truck, handed over the deposit, and moved in that weekend. It was October, and the air already bit at my knuckles. The first week was quiet. The house smelled of old wood and mildew, but I'd lived in worse. I unpacked my boxes in the living room, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The kitchen had a cracked linoleum counter and a fridge that hummed too loud, but it worked. I slept fine in the smaller bedroom, the one with a window facing the overgrown yard. Then the mail started coming. On Monday, an electric bill arrived, addressed to Martin Gresham. I figured it was a mix-up, leftover from the last tenant. I called the utility company to switch it to my name, and the woman on the phone paused. "That address, Gresham's been off our books for years. Died there, I think, 10 years back." Her voice flattened, like she'd said too much. I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. Ray hadn't mentioned a death. I texted him, "Who's Martin Gresham?" No reply. That night, I woke to a faint shuffle downstairs. The clock glowed 2:47 a.m. I lay still, ears straining. It came again, soft, deliberate, like bare feet on tile. I live alone. My pulse thudded as I grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed and crept down the stairs, the wood creaking under my socks. The living room was empty, the front door still locked. In the kitchen, though, I stopped cold. Dirty footprints smudged the linoleum gray, wet smears, too small to be mine, leading from the sink to the back door. The lock there was bolted, untouched. I checked every window, all shut. No one could have gotten in. I mopped the floor, my hands shaking, and told myself it was a fluke. Mud I'd tracked in, smeared by some draft. But the next morning, the footprints were back. Same size, same path, sink to door. I called Ray again. "You get break-ins here?" I asked when he finally picked up. "No," he said, "too quick. Old house. Settles funny. Don't worry." He hung up before I could mention Gresham. By Wednesday, I couldn't sleep. The shuffling came every night, always around 3 a.m., always from the kitchen. I check, bat in hand, and find those damn footprints. I stopped cleaning them, watched them pile up, overlapping like a child's messy dance. I set up my phone to record while I slept. The footage showed nothing, just the empty kitchen, the fridge humming, until 2:59 a.m., when the screen flickered. No figure, no movement, but the footprints appeared, one by one, as if pressed into the floor by invisible weight. Thursday night, I stayed up, sitting at the kitchen table with a flashlight and a knife. The air grew heavy, like a storm was brewing inside the walls. At 3:02, the shuffling started, closer now, behind me. I spun, beam slicing the dark. Nothing. Then the sink dripped. I hadn't touched it. Drip, drip. The water hit the basin, thick and dark, pooling red. I stumbled back, heart slamming, as the shuffling circled me, faster, louder. The footprints smeared fresh across the floor, circling the table, small, bare, with toes too long, too pointed. I bolted upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and shoved the dresser against it. The shuffling followed, slow and relentless, up the stairs. Thump, thump. It stopped outside my room. Silence stretched, unbearable, until a soft scrape began. Nails on wood, tracing the doorframe. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. * leave the key. Get out. * too late. The knob rattled. The knob rattled again. A slow twist that sent a jolt through my spine. I gripped the knife tighter, my breath shallow, fogging in the dim glow of my phone screen. Ray's text stared back at me. * leave the key. Get out. * I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the scraping on the door grew louder, deliberate, like someone testing its strength. The dresser shuddered. inching forward with a groan. Whatever was out there wasn't giving me an exit. I pressed my back to the wall, eyes locked on the door. The air in the room thickened, sour with a wet, earthy smell, like soil after rain. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it across the floor, the bed, the window. The glass was black, reflecting nothing but my own pale face. Then the scraping stopped. Silence clawed at me, worse than the noise. I didn't move, couldn't. My phone buzzed again. "Ray, don't look at it." I fumbled to reply, thumb slipping. "What is it?" No answer. A low hum started, faint, vibrating through the floorboards. It wasn't the fridge this time. It came from under me, deep in the house. The bed frame rattled, just enough to make the springs whine. I edged toward the window, keeping the door in my peripheral. If I could pry it open, climb onto the porch roof, I'd run and never look back. My fingers brushed the latch when something thumped below, heavy, wet, like a sack hitting the ground. Then another, and another. Footsteps, climbing the stairs again, but slower, dragging. I yanked at the window. Stuck. Paint flaked under my nails as I clawed at it, panic searing my throat. The thumping stopped outside the door. A voice whispered, small, cracked, like a kid who'd cried too long. "You're late." My blood froze. The knife slipped in my sweaty grip. "Rent's due." It rasped, closer, seeping through the wood. The dresser jolted hard, scraping a foot across the floor. I lunged, shoving it back, my shoulder screaming. The humming spiked, buzzing in my skull. I grabbed my phone, dialed Ray. It rang once before cutting to static. Then that voice again, through the speaker. "He paid. You didn't." The line went dead. The door buckled, wood splintering at the hinges. I swung the knife at nothing, slashing air, and stumbled to the closet. It was shallow, barely a crawl space, but I squeezed in, pulling the flimsy door shut. My breath hitched, too loud in the dark. The bedroom door crashed open. Silence again. I peered through the slats. The dresser lay toppled, the bed sheets twisted. Those footprints tracked in, fresh, muddy, circling the room. They stopped at the closet. My chest locked, air-trapped. Something tapped the door, light, playful, like a finger testing a drum. Tap, tap. The humming softened, almost a lullaby, but it made my skin crawl. "Found you," the voice whispered, inches away. The closet door creaked open before I could brace it. Nothing stood there, no figure, no shape, just cold, damp air rushing in. Then the floorboards bowed under invisible weight. The knife flew from my hand, skittering across the room like it had been kicked. I scrambled out, tripping over the footprints, and bolted for the stairs. The house groaned, walls flexing inward, as if it were breathing. I hit the living room, grabbed my keys, and lunged for the front door. Locked. I fumbled the bolt, hands slick, when the kitchen light flickered on behind me. I turned. The linoleum was a mess of footprints now, spiraling toward the sink. Water gurgled up from the drain, black, oily, pooling on the counter. A shape rose from it, slow and wrong, small, hunched, dripping. His head tilted too far, like a neck shouldn't bend. "Late," it said, voice bubbling. I threw the door open and ran, barefoot into the yard, the cold grass biting my soles. The house loomed behind me, lights blinking out one by one. I didn't stop until I hit the highway, flags on my tires, still clutching the key I never left behind. Ray never answered again. The bills kept coming, Martin Gresham's name, my address. I don't go back. But last night, mud smeared my apartment floor. Small prints, too pointed. I bought the house in June, a steal at auction. $80,000 for a 3-bedroom colonial on the edge of a small Ohio town. The listing called it a fixer-upper. But the bones were solid. Brick exterior, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch. The catch? No one bid against me. The auctioneer's eyes darted away when I signed, and the realtor handed over the keys with a tight, "Good luck." I figured it was the stale cigarette smell or the water-stained ceilings. I could handle that. I moved in on a muggy afternoon, the kind where sweat sticks to your skin. The movers hauled my boxes inside, grumbling about the narrow stairs. I noticed the cold room right away, the third bedroom, tucked at the end of the hall. Even with the windows shut and the summer heat pressing in, it felt like stepping into a meat locker. My breath puffed faintly as I dropped a box of books on the floor. The radiator hissed when I cranked it, but no warmth came. I shrugged it off, old pipes, probably clogged. Could call a guy later. That night, I slept in the master bedroom, fan whirring against the heat. The cold room stayed shut, its door a chipped white slab I didn't bother opening again. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound, low, rhythmic, like someone exhaling through clenched teeth, came from down the hall. I sat up, ears straining. The fan drowned out most of it, but there it was again. A slow, deliberate huff-huff. I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and padded barefoot to the hall. The cold room door was ajar. I'd locked it, I was sure. My skin prickled as I pushed it wider, the hinges whining. The air hit me hard, sharp and frigid, stinging my nose. The room was empty, just my box of books and bare walls. But the breathing was louder now, echoing off the plaster. I swept the light under the bed, an old metal frame I dragged in that morning. Nothing but dust and a few dead flies. The sound stopped. I stood there, heart thudding, until the silence felt worse than the noise. I shut the door, wedged a chair under the knob, and went back to bed. Sleep didn't come. Morning brought a gray sky and a headache. I checked the room again. Still cold, still empty. The chair was untouched, the door shut tight. I called a plumber about the radiator. He showed up at noon. A stocky guy named Pete with a toolbox and a frown. "These old houses," he muttered, tapping the pipes. "Airlocked, maybe." He bled the system, water spitting into a bucket, but the radiator stayed ice-cold. "Weird," he said, wiping his hands. "Feels like the chill's coming from below." He glanced at the floor, then left without charging me. I didn't ask why. That night, the breathing came again, closer, sharper, right under the bed in my room. I bolted upright, phone in hand, and aimed the light down. Nothing, just hardwood and shadows. But the air turned cold, seeping through my sheets, numbing my toes. I stumbled to the hall, checked the cold room. The door was open again. The chair toppled. My books lay scattered, pages fluttering like something had rifled through them. I slammed the door shut, dragged my dresser to block it, and slept on the couch downstairs, TV blaring to drown out my thoughts. By the third day, I couldn't ignore it. I tore the house apart, checked vents, tapped walls, even pried up a floorboard in the cold room. Nothing explained the chill or the sound. That evening, exhausted, I collapsed into bed, the master bedroom again. The breathing woke me at 3:13 a.m., so close I felt it on my neck. I lunged out of bed, light slashing the dark. The floor under the bed was scratched, deep, jagged lines spelling "go away." My stomach dropped. I hadn't looked there that morning. I grabbed my keys, ready to bolt, when the cold hit bone deep, paralyzing, pinning me to the spot. The breathing circled me now, a rasping chorus from every corner. I don't know how I slept, but I woke at dawn, sprawled on the floor, frost rhyming my eyelashes. The words were gone. The room was warm, too warm. Something was wrong. I staggered to my feet, the frost on my lashes melting into cold streaks down my face. The master bedroom was stifling now, the air thick and humid, like a greenhouse gone wrong. My shirt clung to my chest, soaked through, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The scratches on the floor, "go away," were gone, the wood smooth as if I dreamed them. But I hadn't. I could still feel the cold, a phantom ache in my bones, even as sweat beaded on my forehead. I grabbed my phone, 6:04 a.m., and stumbled to the hall. The cold room door hung wide open, the dresser shoved aside like it weighed nothing. I didn't want to look, but my feet moved anyway. The room was a void, the chill pouring out in waves, sharp enough to make my teeth hurt. My books were stacked now, a neat tower in the center of the floor, pages uncreased. The bed frame creaked, shifting an inch as I stepped closer. I froze. The breathing started again, slow, wet, from under the springs. I dropped to my knees, phone trembling in my grip, and aimed the light. A shadow flickered just for a second, long and thin, gone before I could focus. The breathing stopped. My throat tightened. I backed out, slammed the door, and wedged the dresser back in place. It wouldn't hold, I knew that, but I needed the lie. Downstairs, I brewed coffee, hands fumbling the pot, and called Pete again. "Something's wrong with this house," I said when he picked up. My voice cracked. "The cold, it's not the pipes." He went quiet, then sighed. "Heard stories about that place," he said. "Last owner, guy named Ellis, locked himself in one winter. Froze solid. Coroner said it didn't make sense, heat was on." I gripped the counter. "Why didn't you tell me?" He snorted. "Would you have believed me?" He hung up. I stared at the phone, then the ceiling. The cold room sat right above me. I couldn't stay. I packed a bag, clothes, laptop, keys, and drove to a motel 10 miles out. The clerk barely looked up as I paid for a week. The room smelled of bleach and mildew, but it was warm, normal. I slept hard, no dreams, no breathing. For 2 days, I avoided the house, researching Ellis online. Local papers had scraps: man found frozen in home, cause unknown, dated January 2013. No family, no buyers after. The bank took it, auctioned it cheap. My stomach sank. I bought a tomb. On the third night, the motel phone rang, 2:47 a.m. I jolted awake, staring at the clunky beige thing on the nightstand. No one knew I was here. I lifted the receiver, heart pounding. Static hissed, then a voice, low, garbled, like it was underwater. "You left." My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" I rasped. The line buzzed, then cleared. "Come back." A click. Dead air. I yanked the cord from the wall, but the room felt colder now, the heat vent silent. I checked out at dawn, drove back to the house. I had to know. The porch sagged under my weight as I unlocked the door. Inside, the air was wrung, hot, and still downstairs, Arctic upstairs. I climbed the steps, each one creaking louder, and faced the cold room. The dresser was gone, dragged to the far wall, claw marks gouging the floor. The door stood open, the room pitch black despite the morning light outside. My breath clouded as I stepped in. The bed was gone too, just a bare patch where it had been. The books remained, stacked, but now they were open, pages blank except for one word scratched across each: stay. The breathing came from behind me, close, ragged, in my ear. I spun, swinging my fist at nothing. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking. Cold pressed in, numbing my legs, my chest. I pounded the wood, splinters biting my knuckles, but it wouldn't budge. The breathing grew louder, circling, a chorus of rasps. Something brushed my neck, icy, bony, gone when I swatted at it. My phone died in my hand, screen black. The windows frosted over, cracking as ice spiderwebbed across them. I sank to the floor, back to the wall, as the cold swallowed me. Then it stopped. The room warmed. The door clicked open. I ran downstairs, out into the car. I didn't look back. I peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching on gravel, the house shrinking in my rearview until it was just a gray smudge against the trees. My hands shook on the wheel, knuckles white, as I floored it toward town. The motel was out, whatever followed me there could find me again. I needed distance, a city, somewhere with noise and people to drown out the silence that clung to me like damp rot. The dashboard clock blinked 8:22 a.m. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept right in days, but adrenaline kept me sharp. I'd sell the house remotely, burn the loss, anything to never step foot in it again. Halfway to Columbus, my phone buzzed back to life, signal cutting in. Missed calls from Pete, 3 texts: "You okay? Then don't go back, then call me." I didn't. I stopped at a gas station, filled the tank, and bought a coffee that scalded my tongue. The clerk eyed my rumpled shirt and bloodshot eyes but said nothing. I sat in the car, engine idling, and watched the horizon. The air was warm, normal, but my fingers still felt stiff like they'd never thaw. I drove on. I crashed at a friend's place that night, Jake, an old college buddy with a spare room in Dayton. I told him the house was a bust, bad wiring, left it at that. He didn't push, just handed me a beer and turned on a game. I slept on his couch, the TV's hum lulling me under. At 3:13 a.m. I woke to cold air on my face. The room was dark, Jake's snores rumbling upstairs. My breath puffed white. I sat up, heart slamming, and saw it, frost creeping across the coffee table, curling toward me like fingers. The breathing started soft, insistent, from under the couch. I grabbed my keys and bolted barefoot to the car, Jake's front door banging shut behind me. The frost followed, rhyming the windshield as I revved the engine. I drove aimless, streets blurring, until dawn broke and the cold retreated. My phone rang, unknown number. I answered, voice hoarse. What do you want? Static crackled, then that voice, slow and wet. You. The line cut. I threw the phone into the passenger seat, hands trembling. It wasn't the house. It was me. I stopped running on day 5. A cheap motel off I-70, cash up front, no questions. I sat on the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, and waited. The cold came at midnight, seeping through the vents, frosting the mirror. The breathing filled the room, under the bed, behind the curtains, in the walls. I didn't move. My bag was packed, but there was no point. It'd find me anywhere. The lights flickered, then died. The door locked itself, the bolt sliding with a heavy thunk. I felt it before I saw it, something solid, cold, pressing against my back. I turned. Nothing. Just shadows. But the air shifted, heavy, like someone stood inches away. The breathing stopped, replaced by a low hum, bones vibrating, teeth chattering. My teeth. I couldn't feel my legs. Frost climbed my arms, cracking my skin, and I slumped to the floor. The hum grew louder, a voice threading through it. Stay. My vision blurred, ice sealing my eyes shut. I clawed at the carpet, nails splitting, but the cold pinned me, a weight I couldn't fight. I don't know how long I lay there. Hours, maybe days. I woke to sunlight, the room warm, the frost gone. My skin was raw, red welts where the ice had bitten, but I was alive. The door hung open, the motel lot empty. My phone sat on the bed, screen cracked, a photo loaded, a grainy shot of me, asleep on Jake's couch, frost creeping toward my face. Taken from above. I hadn't brought a camera. I'm back at the house now. Not by choice. The car died yesterday, engine frozen solid, 10 miles from town. I walked here, the cold guiding me, a leash I can't snap. The front door was unlocked, the cold room waiting. It's warm everywhere else, but I don't leave this room. The bed's back, sheets crisp. The books are gone. The breathing's constant now, a lullaby I can't escape. I sleep when it lets me, wake when it wants. The frost doesn't hurt anymore. It's part of me. I don't know what I'm becoming, but I know I can't leave. Not again. I moved into the rowhouse in late September, a narrow brick thing squeezed between two others on a quiet Philly street. It was a last-minute rental, $900 a month, utilities included, no questions asked. The ad said furnished, which meant a sagging couch, a wobbly table, and a bed with a dip in the middle. The landlord, a wiry woman named Carla, dropped the keys in my hand and warned me not to lose them. Only set I've got, she said, her eyes flicking to the door. I nodded, too tired from the move to care. I'd been crashing on friends' couches for weeks, this was a step up. The place was old, creaky, with walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's TV. I unpacked my duffel in the bedroom, a cramped box with a single window overlooking an alley. The first night, I found the key. It was in the kitchen drawer, under a pile of takeout menus, a rusted thing, heavy with teeth too jagged for any modern lock. I turned it over in my hand, its weight odd against my palm. The front door was a deadbolt, the back a chain. I tried it on both, then the windows, even the basement hatch. Nothing fit. I tossed it back in the drawer, figuring it was junk from some past tenant. At 1 a.m. I woke to a sound, metal scraping metal, sharp and slow. It came from downstairs, the front door. I lay still, ears straining as it dragged on scritch asterisk, like someone testing a lock. My pulse kicked up. I grabbed my phone and a kitchen knife I'd unpacked earlier, creeping down the stairs in socks. The living room was dark, streetlight slicing through the blinds. The scraping stopped as I reached the door. I pressed my eye to the peephole, empty stoop, just leaves skittering in the wind. The deadbolt was locked, the knob still. I exhaled, feeling stupid, and went back to bed. Morning showed the truth. The lock was scratched deep, uneven gouges around the keyhole, fresh enough to shine in the sun. I ran my thumb over them, the metal cold and rough. No one could have done that from inside. I called Carla. You get vandals here? I asked. She paused too long. Not usually. Kids, maybe? Change the lock if it bugs you. She hung up before I could press. I didn't have the cash for a locksmith, so I wedged a chair under the knob that night and slept with the knife under my pillow. The scraping came again at 2:17 a.m., louder, more insistent. I bolted upright, phone in one hand, blade in the other. It wasn't just scraping now, a faint click joined it like a key turning wrong. I checked the peephole again, nothing but shadows. The chair held firm, but the scratches were deeper in the morning, curling into the doorframe. I bought a cheap security camera online, overnight shipping, and set it up by dusk, pointed at the stoop, feeding to my phone. I barely slept, eyes glued to the grainy live feed. At 3 a.m. it flickered black for 5 seconds, then came back. No one. The lock had new gouges, longer, like claw marks. Day 3, I stopped leaving the house. Work could wait, I called in sick, voice hoarse from no sleep. The camera caught nothing, just static bursts at odd hours. I tested the rusted key again, jamming it into every lock, even the radiator valves. Useless. That night, the scraping hit at 1:47 a.m., but this time, the back door rattled too, a heavy thud, then silence. I checked both. More scratches, inside and out on locks I hadn't touched. My stomach twisted. Someone or something had a key that worked. I sat on the couch, camera feed running, knife in my lap. At 2:30, the screen went black. A thud shook the floor, upstairs, my bedroom. I gripped the blade, heart slamming, and climbed the stairs. The window was open, curtains flapping. I'd locked it. Footsteps creaked behind me, slow, deliberate, on the stairs I'd just climbed. I spun. Empty. The front door clicked open downstairs, the chair skittering across the floor. I ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser against it. The rusted key sat on my nightstand, I hadn't brought it up. The scraping started again on my door now, slow and deep, carving into the wood. The scraping clawed at the bedroom door, a slow, jagged rhythm that sank into my skull. I pressed my shoulder to the dresser, its edge biting my skin, and held the knife out like it could stop whatever was on the other side. The rusted key glinted on the nightstand, mocking me. I hadn't touched it since the kitchen, yet here it was. My phone buzzed, the camera feed flickering back online. I glanced at it, black screen, then static, then the living room, the front door wide open, the chair toppled, scratches trailing across the floor toward the stairs. No one in sight. The scraping paused, and I heard it, a low click like a lock giving way. The door shuddered, the dresser jolting an inch. I braced harder, sweat stinging my eyes, but the air turned heavy, thick with a sour tang, like rust and whetstone. Footsteps paced outside, soft but uneven, circling the hall. I stabbed the knife into the gap between door and frame, wedging it tight. The pacing stopped. Silence pressed in, unbearable, until a faint tap-tap echoed from the window. I spun, blade still stuck. The glass was shut, locked, but the alley light dimmed, shadows stretching across the panes. Something was out there. I yanked the curtains back. Nothing, just brick and trash cans, the usual city grime. But the tapping grew louder, insistent, inside the room now, under the bed. My chest locked. I dropped to my knees, peering into the dark. The rusted key lay there, inches from where it had been on the nightstand. It vibrated, scraping the floorboards in tiny jerks. I grabbed it, the metal biting cold, and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thunk and slid back, straight toward me like a magnet snapped it home. The door rattled again, harder, with splintering at the hinges. I lunged for the knife, prying it free, and swung at the air as the dresser tipped. The door flew open, slamming the wall. Empty hall. No footsteps, no shadows. Just scratches gouged deep into the plaster, spiraling toward the stairs. I bolted, knife in hand, down to the living room. The front door hung ajar, cold air seeping in. I grabbed my coat, ready to run, when the back door thudded. Once, twice, then silence. Scratches bloomed on its surface, fresh and wet, as I watched. I didn't think, just ran, out the front, into the street. The rowhouse loomed behind me, windows dark, but I felt it staring. I crashed at a diner 3 blocks away, nursing coffee until dawn, the key still in my pocket. I couldn't drop it, couldn't leave it. The waitress eyed my shaking hands but didn't ask. At 6 a.m., I called Carla. "What's with the house?" I snapped. She sighed, voice flat. "Old tenant lost a key. Never found it. Things happen. You're out." I muttered a yes. "Good," she said, and hung up. I didn't go back that day. Stayed at a friend's, couch surfing again, the key burning a hole in my pocket. Night 2, I woke to scraping, faint, distant, under the floor. My friend's apartment was 3rd story, no basement. I checked the door, locked, no scratches. But the key was gone from my coat, sitting on the counter when I turned around. I threw it out the window, watched it clatter into the alley. Morning came and it was back on my pillow, rust flaking onto the sheets. Day 5, I returned. Couldn't run anymore. It'd follow. The rowhouse smelled of damp iron, the air buzzing like a live wire. Scratches covered everything, walls, floors, even the couch cushions, curling into shapes I couldn't read. The rusted key fit the front door now, turning smooth, though it hadn't before. I locked myself in, sat on the stairs, and waited. At 2 a.m., the scraping started. Every door, every window, a chorus of claws. I held the key, its teeth biting my palm, and felt the house shift, walls groaning like it was waking up. Something clicked behind me. Upstairs, the bedroom. I climbed, legs leaden, and found the door open. Scratches formed a circle on the floor, the key's shape etched in the center. I dropped it there and the scraping stopped. Silence. Then a voice, dry, cracked, from the walls. Mine. The floor tilted, the circle sinking, swallowing the key. The house settled, doors locking in unison. I'm still here. The scratches move at night, tracing new paths. They're on my arms now, shallow but growing. I don't leave. It won't let me. I inherited the cottage from my uncle in April, a squat little place tucked into the woods of upstate New York. He died alone there, heart attack, the coroner said, and left it to me in a will I didn't know existed. I'd only met him twice, a quiet man with a smoker's cough and a habit of staring too long. The lawyer handed me the keys and a deed yellowed at the edges, muttering, "It's yours now. Needs work." I drove up that weekend expecting a fixer-upper I could flip. What I got was a damp, heavy stillness that clung to my skin. The cottage was one-story, cedar siding gone gray with a sloped roof and a chimney spitting moss. Inside, the air hit me wet, earthy, like a basement after a flood. I gagged, cracking windows, but it wouldn't lift. The furniture was sparse, a plaid couch, a card table, a bed with a sunken mattress. No mildew stains, no leaks, the walls were dry to the touch. I checked the basement door, a warped slab off the kitchen. It creaked open to a concrete staircase, the bulb flickering yellow. Down there, the floor was bone dry, just boxes and a rusty bike. The smell stayed upstairs. I slept that night in the bedroom, windows wide despite the chill. At 3 a.m. I woke to a whisper, soft, garbled, like words drowned in mud. It came from the vent, a rusted grate near the floor. I pressed my ear to it, heart ticking faster. Down it hissed, clear as a bell. I jolted back, staring at the dark. The vent was cold, no air moving. I grabbed a flashlight from my bag and aimed it inside, dust and cobwebs, nothing else. The whisper faded. I told myself it was pipes, exhaustion, anything sane. Sleep didn't come after that. Morning showed something new. A damp spot bloomed on the living room wall, a faint smear near the couch. I pressed my hand to it, cool, slick, but the paint stayed dry. By noon, it was bigger, edges curling into a shape, two hollows like eyes, a slash like a mouth. My stomach turned. I called a contractor, a guy named Dave from town. He showed up in a pickup, toolbox rattling, and frowned at the spot. "No water damage," he said, tapping the wall. "Plaster's solid. Weird smell, though." He checked the basement, came up shrugging. "Nothing's wet. Could be mold in the vents." He left me a number and a bill I couldn't afford. That night, the whisper returned, louder, from every vent, overlapping like a crowd underwater. Downstairs, it begged, tugging at my ears. I ripped the bedroom grate off, screws clattering, and shone the light deeper. A glint caught my eye as something metal wedged in the duct. I fished it out with a hanger, a silver locket, tarnished, no chain. Inside, a photo, my uncle, younger, staring blank, and a woman I didn't know, her face scratched out. The whisper stopped when I held it. My hands shook as I set it on the nightstand. By morning, the damp spot had spread, sealing now, a second face forming, eyeless, mouth gaping. I threw the locket in a drawer, grabbed my keys, and drove to town. The library had old papers on microfiche. I dug until I found it. Local woman missing, 1992. No name, no photo, just a note about the cottage, a search that turned up nothing. My uncle's name wasn't mentioned, but the dates lined up. He'd lived here then. I sat there, pulse racing, as the pieces clicked wrong. Back at the cottage, the smell was unbearable, rotting, alive. The faces on the walls wept now, slow trickles staining the floor. The basement door was open, I'd locked it. The whispers roared from below, a single word on loop, "Come." My flashlight beam shook as I descended, the concrete slick under my boots. The boxes were gone, the bike too, just a bare floor and a crack, hairline thin, running wall to wall. Water seeped from it, black and slow, pooling at my feet. The whispers laughed. The laughter echoed up from the crack, a gurgling cackle that bounced off the basement walls and sank into my chest. I stumbled back, the black water lapping at my boots, cold and oily. My flashlight beam danced over the concrete, the crack widening as I watched, splitting an inch, then two, like a mouth stretching open. The damp smell thickened, choking me, a mix of rot and something sharper, like burnt hair. I turned for the stairs, but the whispering started again, behind me, above me, everywhere. Stay. My legs locked, knees trembling as the water rose, soaking my jeans. I forced myself up, one step, then another, the wood groaning under my weight. The basement door slammed shut before I reached it, the lock clicking hard. I pounded it, fists slick with sweat, but it didn't budge. The whispers turned to a hum, low and steady, vibrating the air. I spun, light slashing the dark. The water was halfway up the stairs now, rippling without a source, and the crack glowed faintly red, pulsing like a vein under skin. Something moved in it, a shadow too long to be human, twisting in the murk. I grabbed a crowbar from the corner, my uncle's, rusted but solid, and wedged it into the doorframe. The wood splintered, paint flaking, as I pried. The humming spiked, a scream in my skull, and the water surged, hitting my thighs. It wasn't just cold, it burned, acid eating through my pants. I yanked harder, the door giving an inch, then swung the crowbar at the lock. Metal clanged, sparks flew, and it burst open. I scrambled into the kitchen, slamming it shut, and dragged the table to block it. The humming stopped. The water didn't follow. I sank to the floor, gasping, my legs raw and red through shredded denim. The faces on the walls stared, three now, ceiling in both sides, their mouths weeping black streaks. I crawled to the drawer, pulled out the locket, and snapped it open. My uncle's face was unchanged, but the woman's, her scratched-out eyes were back, wide and bloodshot, locked on me. I dropped it, the silver clattering, and the whispers hissed from the vents, "See her." My throat tightened. I didn't want to know. I stayed upstairs, pacing as night fell. The damp smell clawed at my lungs, the faces growing sharper, noses, cheekbones, teeth bared in silent screams. I taped the vents shut, cardboard and duct tape, but the whispers seeped through, louder, downstairs. "Find her." The basement door rattled, the table scraping an inch. I wedged a chair under it, then the couch, piling anything heavy I could lift. The floorboards softened under me, sagging, wet to the touch. I didn't sleep, just sat, crowbar in my lap, watching the walls cry. At dawn, I called Dave again. "Something's in the basement," I said, voice shaking. He didn't laugh. "Heard that before," he muttered. "Your uncle said the same." "I'll be there." He arrived at noon, toolbox in hand, face grim. The faces were gone when he walked in, just damp stains, no shapes. He sniffed, scowled. "Smells like death." We moved the furniture, pried the basement door open. The water was gone, the crack sealed, just a faint scar in the concrete. "Dry as a bone," he said, kneeling. "You sure?" I nodded, but my legs still stung. He tapped the floor, then froze. "Hollow," he whispered and swung his hammer. The concrete cracked, dust puffing, and a hole opened, dark, deep, swallowing the light. The smell hit us, rot, copper, wet earth. Dave gagged, dropping the hammer. I shone my flashlight down. Bones glinted, small, scattered, human. A skull stared up, jaw unhinged, hair matted in clumps. The whispers roared, "Her." Dave bolted, truck peeling out before I could move. I stood there, alone, the locket burning in my pocket. The water came back that night, seeping up, flooding the basement, climbing the stairs. I didn't run. Couldn't. The faces returned, clearer, all her same eyes, same scream. The cottage shook, walls bowing, as the whispers chanted, "Stay with her." I'm still here, crowbar in hand, waiting for the floor to give. The water reached the kitchen by midnight, black and thick, bubbling up through the floorboards like tar. I stood on the table, crowbar gripped tight, as the cottage groaned, walls cracking, ceiling sagging. The faces wept everywhere now, dozens of her, etched into plaster and wood, their eyes bleeding dark trails that mingled with the flood. The whispers weren't whispers anymore, a voice, raw and broken, screaming from the vents, the basement, my skull, "Stay with her." My legs shook, the burns on my skin flaring as the damp closed in. I couldn't leave. The door wouldn't open, the windows wouldn't break, glass held like steel when I swung. I climbed to the counter, the table sinking under the water's weight. The locket slipped from my pocket, splashing into the murk. It floated, bobbing, then snapped open, her face staring up, alive, mouth moving. "You." The water surged, hitting my waist, pulling at me. I swung the crowbar at the wall, desperate, plaster shattered, but the faces stayed, multiplying, her scream carving into every surface. The floor buckled, wood splitting, and I fell, the flood swallowing me whole. It wasn't deep just to my chest, but it pinned me heavy, alive. I clawed at the counter, gasping as the basement door burst open, the table and couch tumbling down the stairs. The water dragged me after them, a current with no source, sucking me into the dark. My flashlight sank, its beam catching bones, hers scattered in the crack, now a gaping maw. The locket spun past, her eyes locked on mine, and the voice roared, "Here." The concrete sealed above me, trapping me below. I thrashed, lungs burning, but the water held me down, wrapping my arms, my throat. My feet hit something soft, fabric, flesh, and I yanked back. Her bones shifted, reassembling, a hand clutching my ankle. I screamed, bubbles bursting as she rose, skeletal, draped in rot, hair trailing like weeds. Her face was the locket's, the walls, eyeless but seeing. She pulled me closer, ribs pressing my chest, and whispered, "Stay." The crowbar slipped from my hand, sinking, useless. The water stilled, warm now, cradling us. I don't know how I breathed, maybe I didn't. Time blurred, the dark softening. She held me, her grip loosening, and the whispers faded to a hum. My skin stopped burning, my pulse slowed. The basement walls pulsed, wet and red, like a heart flexing. I saw him then, my uncle, faint in the murk, standing over us. His mouth moved, no sound, but I knew, I tried. He'd stayed too, locked her down here, paid with his life. Now me. The water receded at dawn, I felt it, not saw it, light seeping through cracks above. I lay on the concrete, soaked, alive, her bones scattered again. The locket rested on my chest, closed, warm. I climbed the stairs, legs leaden, and found the cottage silent. No faces, no damp, just stale air and sunlight. The walls were dry, the floor solid. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, the locket in my fist. I couldn't drop it, couldn't leave. Days passed. I don't go outside much, groceries come, delivered, left on the stoop. The smell's back, faint, in the corners. At night, the vents hum, her voice threading through, "Stay." I do. The basement door's locked, but I hear her shifting, waiting. The locket stays with me, her face scratched out again when I check. My uncle's photo's gone now, just her, blank, eyeless. The walls are clean, but I feel her in them, under me, everywhere. Last night, the damp spot returned, my bedroom, above the bed. It's her face, clearer than before, smiling. The water seeps again, slow, from the floor. I don't fight it. My skin softening, peeling at the edges, wet to the touch. I sleep more, dream less. The crowbar's by the door, but I won't use it. She's here, and I'm hers. The cottage breathes with us, sinking deeper into the woods. No one comes. No one will. I rented the farmhouse in November, a weathered sprawl an hour west of Omaha, surrounded by flat fields and silence. It was $600 a month, a deal I couldn't pass up after the divorce left me scrambling. The realtor, a wiry guy named Tom, called it rustic, code for warped floors and a kitchen stuck in the 70s. He handed me the keys with a shrug. "No neighbors for miles," he said. "You'll like the quiet." I did at first. The solitude was a bomb, just me and the wind rattling the shutters. I found the phone on day 2, tucked in the hall closet behind a stack of brittle Life magazines. An old rotary, beige plastic cracked, cord snaking to a live jack in the wall. I lifted the receiver, dial tone, steady and clear. Weird for a place this remote, but I figured the last tenant never disconnected it. I dialed my cell to test it, it rang through, my own voice bouncing back on voicemail. I hung up, left it plugged in, a relic I didn't need but didn't toss. The house creaked around me, settling into dusk. That night, it rang 3:14 a.m., shrill and insistent. I jolted awake, heart kicking, and stumbled to the hall. The sound cut through the dark, louder than it should have been. I grabbed the receiver, breath short. "Hello?" Static hissed, then a voice, low, male, calm, "You're awake." My skin prickled. "Who is this?" I snapped. A pause, then, "You're in the kitchen now, looking at the sink." I wasn't, I stood frozen in the hall, but my eyes darted toward the kitchen door. The line clicked dead. I checked every room, phone in one hand, a butcher knife in the other. Windows locked, doors bolted, no footprints in the dust. The fields outside were empty, moonlit and still. I unplugged the phone, yanked the cord from the jack, and shoved it back in the closet. My cell showed no signal, typical out here, but I kept it close. Sleep came in fits, the voice looping in my head. Morning brought gray light and a headache, but no answers. It rang again the next night, same time, same piercing wail. I'd buried it under coats, but the sound clawed through. I ripped the closet open, grabbed the receiver. "You're scared," the voice said, smoother now. Standing there, knife on the floor. I hadn't brought the knife, it was still in the kitchen, but my hands shook anyway. "What do you want?" I rasped. Static crackled, then, "You're checking the window." "It's locked." I hadn't moved. "Stop it," I barked, slamming the phone down. The cord was unplugged, dangling loose. It shouldn't have rung. I tore the house apart that day, checked the attic, cobwebs and insulation, the crawl space, dirt and mice, even the barn out back, rotted beams and hay. No lines, no wires beyond the jack. I called Tom from town where my cell worked. Old phone in the house keeps ringing. You know about it. He laughed dry. No service out there. Probably a prank. Toss it. He didn't sound convinced. I bought a lock for the closet, a heavy padlock, and bolted it shut that night, the phone inside. I slept with earplugs, but I felt it, the vibration through the walls. At 3:14 it rang again. Muffled, insistent, behind the lock. I sat up, earplugs out, staring at the closet. The padlock rattled, metal clinking. I grabbed the knife, crept closer. The ringing stopped as I touched the handle, but the voice came anyway. No phone, just air. You're holding the knife. You're scared. My stomach dropped. I swung the door open. The phone sat there, cordless, silent, but the dial spun, clicking numbers, 314. My name hissed through the static, Jess. No one here knew it. I'd signed the lease as J. Carter. I bolted to the truck, knife still in hand, and drove. The house shrank behind me, but the ringing followed, faint, in my ears, under my skin. I floored the truck, gravel spitting under the tires as the farmhouse faded into the night. The ringing clung to me, a dull hum burrowing into my skull, even with the windows down and the cold Nebraska wind blasting my face. My cell stayed dead, no bars, no help, but the knife lay on the passenger seat, its blade catching moonlight. I aimed for town, 30 miles east, where lights and people might drown out the voice. At 3:30 a.m. the hum spiked and my name hissed again, Jess. I swerved, nearly ditch-bound, and slammed the brakes. The truck idled, headlights slicing the empty road. Silence. Then the glove box clicked open. The phone sat there, beige, cracked, cord dangling. I hadn't brought it. My hands locked on the wheel, breath shallow, as the rotary dial spun, 314, and it rang, sharp and close. I flung it out the window, glass shattering on asphalt, but the ringing didn't stop. It came from the seat now, the dash, the air. You're running, the voice said, calm, too near. Knife's no good. I grabbed it anyway, slashing at nothing, and peeled out again. The hum chased me, a shadow in the engine's roar. I hit town at 4 a.m., a gas station's neon the only glow. The clerk, a kid with acne and a hoodie, barely glanced up as I stumbled in, knife tucked under my jacket. Phone, I rasped, pointing to the counter. He slid a landline over. I dialed Tom, hands trembling. It rang twice before the voice cut in, not Tom's, you're at the counter. He's watching. The kid's eyes flicked to me, then away. I dropped the receiver, static buzzing, and backed out. The truck's cab was empty, no phone, but the hum pulsed louder, my name threading through it. I didn't sleep, just drove east, then north, no plan, just motion. Dawn broke gray and thin, fields blurring past. At a diner 50 miles out I stopped, palms sweaty, on a coffee mug. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes, refilled it without a word. My cell pinged signal back, 5 missed calls, unknown number. I didn't listen, just texted Tom, asterisk phone's alive. Help, asterisk his reply came fast. Asterisk burn it. Leave, asterisk I laughed, bitter, and paid the bill. The hum was softer now, but it never left. By noon I was back. Couldn't outrun it, the house pulled me, a hook in my gut. The farmhouse squatted under a flat sky, shutters banging in the wind. Inside, the closet door hung open, padlock snapped, the phone on the floor, intact, cord coiled. It rang as I stepped in, 3:14 p.m. now, not a.m. I answered, throat dry. You're home, the voice said, pleased. Looking at me. I stared at the rotary, its dial still. Who are you? I whispered. Static, then, you. The line went dead, but the hum stayed, warm in my ears. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, knife beside me. It rang every hour, 4:14, 5:14, each time the voice sharper, describing me, you're tired, you're holding me, you're not leaving. It was right. I didn't eat, didn't move, just listened as the house darkened. At 9:14 it said, you're mine, and the hum turned to a buzz, electric, under my skin. My reflection in the window shifted, eyes too wide, mouth too thin, not mine, but close. The phone weighed heavier, molding to my grip. Midnight came. It rang 3:14 a.m. again. I picked up, silent. You're me, it said, my voice now flat and sure. I dropped it, but my hand wouldn't let go, the cord wrapped my wrist, tightening. The room spun, walls flexing, and the hum was my pulse, my breath. I'm still here, days later, maybe weeks. The phone rings, I answer. It's me on the line, telling me what I'm doing, what I'll do. The knife's gone. The truck won't start. The fields watch, empty, as I sit waiting for the next call. I don't fight it anymore. It knows my name. I know its voice. We're the same now.